Okay, so welcome to another episode of Putting the Pieces Together with Jigsaw Learning. I'm here today with Colin Byers, newest learning associate with Jigsaw Learning. And Colin comes to us with a very impressive resume. Colin comes to us with an Adobe Education Leader designation, as well as receiving the ATA's John Mazurek Memorial Scholarship for teaching technology. He has a vast background, and I could list everything in here that Colin is possibly able to do. But I won't, because I'm going to let Colin talk a little bit about himself. So hi, Colin.
Hi. I've been in education for 20 odd years now, and I started out in K-12 and taught a number of different courses there, media arts being one of the main ones, also known as communication technology. And I taught drama and English and social studies. I taught online. From there, I moved on into the instructional design realm and started working with Olds College as an instructional designer, and moved into working with Alberta Health Services, doing a very similar job. I was their e-learning producer for their content in their leadership program. So yeah, it was a great experience because it's very different worlds to work in, especially when you're working with post-secondary or government compared to K-12. They have very different needs and very different processes, but it was a great experience. And it also got me to utilize those nerdy software tools that I really like. It'll be recognized some of the work I was doing here in Alberta, and they said, "Hey, would you like to be an Adobe Education Leader?" They've definitely done some good work in the online realm in the last little while, and I love seeing the tools that I use on a regular basis being used by more people, and especially by students. And so it's amazing what we can create now. Compared to when I first started in education to what we do now, it just kind of blows my mind. It's just been an astronomical technological growth. So I find it very exciting to work in the online world and with e-learning, and yeah, the software continually changes, so it never gets old for me. It's great.
Fantastic. So you've talked a little bit about your background. I know, you taught drama, you've worked with Olds College, you've worked with Alberta Health Services. What prompted you to join the Jigsaw Learning team?
Well, my contract had finished up with AHS, and I was looking for something that would be a good fit for my skill set. Definitely looking around at instructional design opportunities, but when I saw this position, I kind of jumped at it because when I was involved in K-12, I was always the ed tech guy in school. I was that, the tech champion, or whatever you want to call it. It was different in every school, but it always ended up being on my plate because it was something I looked for. And as I mentioned with software, I always found it exciting to find new ways of presenting information to students and to teach students and to get them to create things themselves. And I think that's something that has always been a passion of mine. And part of that whole process working in schools, which was really rewarding, was working with staff and helping them with some of those tools. And some people really embraced that had not changed their teaching practices in some time, and they found, wow, there's so many more things that we can do now that actually, one, make your job easier, and two, make it more interactive, more fun, and create a deeper learning experience for the students. So yeah, when I saw the position with Jigsaw, I'm like, wow, that's it. That's what I'm looking for. That excites me because I get to use all those tools I like, and I get to work with people and have a positive effect on their practice. But ultimately, the effect is a trickle down, and it affects our students, and those are our customers, right? And we want our customers to be happy and to learn lots and to have a great experience with education. And I think this is just one way to tap into that. So yeah, I found that very exciting, and yeah, I'm glad to be part of the team.
So for those for whom online learning is kind of a new concept, I know that you've dabbled for quite some time, and I took my master's through an online program. So, I mean, it's been around, but how would you differentiate between online learning and traditional education?
Yeah, I'm sure people will argue with me on this one. I think of traditional education, that that we grew up with in K to 12 for most people anyway, was that face to face, teacher up front giving a lecture to students, and that's kind of how it always was. It's changed, and so with online learning and distance learning, that format has drastically shifted towards the digital. I mean, distance education used to be pen and paper, and to some extent it still is. So online learning, in my mind, is that digital embrace where you're taking away that pen and paper side of things and making it completely online, completely digital, and allowing students to do all their work, basically anywhere they go. Not necessarily anytime, anywhere, that sort of thing, because that doesn't necessarily work with online education. It depends on the format. So a lot of schools still have to structure a timetable. And whether you're in post-secondary or whether you're in K to 12, you still have semesters or years or what have you to work within. And yeah, it's something that you have to work with as a student. And I think some people think, oh yeah, online is anytime, anywhere, any pace. That's not the same thing. That's more of an e-learning thing. And so this is where people get in, a bit of an argument about what it is. What is online learning and what is e-learning? And are they the same thing? Are they different things? In my mind, e-learning is that asynchronous piece. You do it on your own. It's a training piece. It's all in one package. You go through it yourself. You're not getting help from an instructor. You walk through the course. You do whatever it is for assessments, questions, quizzes. And when you're done, you pass or you don't. And that's the difference. Whereas online learning is, very much like what we used to have face to face. It's guided. It has an instructor or coach. It has somebody to walk you through the process, and it has somebody to interact with. And it's part of a community. That was one thing I found when I first started taking master's courses through Athabasca University. Was the instructors embraced the idea of online community. And I think that's really important to understand, because people that come to these courses, don't necessarily come from your town. They come from all over the world, literally. I had students that were from, Hawaii, and some were from, Europe, and all over the place. And so we had to build a rapport with each other and work with international timelines for group work and things like that. And that's where that online learning is different than an e-learning, because you've got to actually make it work together rather than just go do it. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting place to work in. And I think it can be just as engaging, maybe if not more so than face to face, because you don't have some of those other things going on that you have to handle in a classroom. And so I think it's kind of a neat place to be. And I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. I think it's going to be something that people will continually opt for.
So on that notion, if we're looking at the considerations that people really want online learning to be available and viable and acceptable as an alternative form for education, what sort of considerations might need attention to make that happen?
Oh, there's so many considerations. Considerations from the people who are rolling out that education to the people who are consuming it. And so there's a split, and that split is, the education realm, where you've got instructors and leaders and IT people, and they have to make all those decisions as to what's the best fit for them for rolling out that information. And then there's the consumer of that education, which is the student or the family, and they have to make sure that they have the right or appropriate types of equipment and connection for that type of learning. And so every place that offers that is going to offer a different experience to some extent. And depending on how interactive that experience is, or how much it relies on internet connectivity in a high-speed sense, really impacts the consumability of those products. And so I think, with online learning, people really need to consider designing something that will work for a pretty broad audience. Because right now in Canada, we unfortunately are heavily lacking in broadband access. And so when we look at the statistics that the government has put out, it's approximately 40% of rural Canadians don't have broadband, which is quite a bit. And then when you consider that there's so many students now that are seeing that online learning, or families are seeing online learning as an option, um, that is a real blockade for them, because if they can't access things with internet, then that it's no longer an option unless they're offering pen and paper, but that's a distance learning option rather than a online option. And so you can augment your online with that if you so choose, but that's really, kind of defeats the purpose of moving online. Because it gives you that flexibility. But I think that one of the biggest issues that we face in rural Canada is our internet.
You bring up access to internet, and you and I have had some great conversations around, the digital divide and digital equity. And it's not just access to internet when we talk about digital equity. Yes, the availability of the internet impacts and how many devices are accessing the internet at the same time. But you and I have talked about some of those other pieces around equity. So do you want to share some thoughts around that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, like it's not just that, your internet connection. It's what you have in your home. Every house is going to be different. So, students are going to be connected with different devices, and they're not all the same. They don't all have the same capabilities. So, as educators, we've got to design programs for online learning that meets the needs of learners on multiple devices. So if your kid has a phone at home and that is their only means of getting online, you've got to make sure that your content will work on that. And so, yeah, that doesn't fall into the hands of the user. It's the people that are putting together the content that need to do that. But I think there's, bigger considerations with digital equity as well. When we talk about online learning in a home, everybody's home is different. And everybody's timetables at home are different. How they manage technology in their homes is different. I think of kids where they might have a nice quiet place to go and work, and that's great. But some households don't have that, and so we have to be cognizant that students need to have some flexibility in their day to work around those things that they have no control over. They don't have control over what their parents or family members necessarily do in their house. Those distractions, whether they have a schedule. Some kids don't have a bedtime, so they wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning and they want to go online to school. And if an online school says, thou must show up on a camera, they're going to be, I just crawled out of bed. That's not going to happen. I don't want to show my bedroom. I don't want to show my, my bad head. And so we have to think about those things. We have to think of it, in terms of mental health. A big part of equity is making people feel comfortable enough to be part of an online community. And, that acceptance just doesn't happen by turning on your computer and your camera. It's like any other classroom. You have to create a rapport with your students. You have to build a culture within your classroom. You have to be able to make sure that everyone in there feels like they fit in some place. And that's the difficulty with digital equity. We don't know what that place is like. Yeah, we don't step into those people's homes, so we have no idea. We see a little snippet of what the that students day to day is by our own interaction, but it's such a small percentage of what really goes on in a person's house. We have no real idea of how to address that very effectively. And so is there a parent there to help them out? Do they have other chores that they have to do? Yeah, there's all sorts of considerations to take into play. And finances, right? You know, people might be able to get an internet connection, but if they can't afford to get enough data for their device, then that's not going to be equitable either. So there's lots of things that we need to think about. And I know schools try to think about those things. A lot of them will give out Chromebooks, to students, kind of levels the playing field that way. But it's all those other things that we don't have control over that really do impact students and their ability to learn. So I think that's a big conversation to have. We have to think about when we roll out information too. One example I gave to a school division here was timetabling. If all of your teachers that are online meet with students at the exact same time every day, that means that all those students are using up their bandwidth at the same time. But if you were to say, okay, grade 12 teachers, tell your students every morning from 9 to 10 that you got to watch some, you got to do your homework for the day or a reading or something, right? Something that doesn't eat up a lot of bandwidth. And then, have another grade say, okay, you're going to have your online meet at 9:30, and another grade, you're going to have yours at 9, and so on and so forth. You can stagger things around and work with schedules that way to help with that equity piece within a person's home. And that's a big chore to do. And it tends to work better with smaller school divisions. If I'm being perfectly honest, something the size of, a bigger center like Edmonton or Calgary, that's going to be almost impossible to deal with. However, in a city that size, you probably have broadband access. So it makes it a little bit of, a balancing act that way, but for our rural users, that's definitely a consideration to make.